to dominate our questions about safety. Because I think that the American culture is not really used to the midwifery model of care, and they're not familiar with home birth, and so they tend to regard it with great suspicion. I believe that viewpoint is pretty much supported by the medical establishment. So we spend 45 minutes to an hour talking about where the care takes place, how it takes place, what strategies are in place in the event of need for transfer, and I usually do that often through anecdote, because anecdote seems like storytelling, such a wonderful way for people to really relate to a situation. I mean, there's lots of statistics out there, and most of them are positive, but anecdote, well, I just had a situation last week, and this is what we did. Well, what was your worst case scenario? And I also feel that people, when they can get you on that level, then we can start building a foundation of trust, which I really believe in building rapport-based care. I think that that's partly why I'm here. I think that I believe that even good care and safe outcomes emanate from a carefully constructed foundation of trust between the birthing mom, the dad, and the midwife care provider. So I try to give them all the details I can from my practice.
Are there specific complications that seem to come up more as people's concerns rather than others?
I think that most people don't really know what potential complications can occur, and therefore they don't know the questions to ask. So, but I try to tell them that we're living, especially in the New York City area, within 5 to 15 minutes from any hospital. I try to talk about the complication that's perhaps the most common, and the one that I find most people are concerned about is that a baby may not be tolerating labor well. So then as soon as I tell someone, especially someone who's seen the movie and so they'll want to just kind of like fish out that baby in the first scene, that we actually listen to the baby's heartbeat in labor with a Doppler, and that they'll be hearing that, I'll be hearing that, and I'll be giving them feedback on how the baby sounds. And sometimes I'll talk about a transfer for fetal distress would be a more likely type of a transfer. And so I'll say, I'll listen to the baby, and the baby sounds fine. If we have some meconium on board, then we have to look at things differently. I have to listen to the baby more carefully. So that's the most common concern of people that consult with me. So I tend to usually give a lot of detail about that one. But sometimes, especially after people have seen the movie and heard that guy go, a woman can lose her whole blood supply in 20 minutes. I find that the hemorrhage question is now often a topic of conversation. And actually, I just had a postpartum hemorrhage this week, which could have been expected because the woman gave birth to, I'm sorry, just because someone beat your record, a 10-pound, 14-ounce baby after 4 days of labor. And we know that a big baby does something to the uterus and makes it less likely to contract effectively afterwards. So, and her placenta was retained, and I had to remove it at home and start an IV, stop her hemorrhage, give her medications, and consider whether or not I would bring her in for a transfusion. I didn't. We talked about it, and she's taking iron, and she's got her breast milking, which if she had hemorrhage badly enough, she wouldn't be able to make that. So I made the judgment call, but I have taken people in for postpartum hemorrhages that I've stabilized and that I felt did need a transfusion 3 times in 13 years. So.
And what about you, when people come to you as an MD and you suggest a home birth, how do they react?
Well, just to correct that, I am a DO and osteopathic physician. I know it's a common confusion, but I counsel my clients very carefully about it. I have a lot of experience working in hospitals and birth centers and also at home situations, both in America and in Bali, Indonesia, and everyone hemorrhages in Bali pretty much. So, nutritional issues, like white rice, things like that. So yes, whole grains are important. But what I do in my counseling is I often discuss how there's an illusion of safety created in a hospital environment because everything is seemingly at hand. And I tell them a few stories about how it's change of shift and the baby's heartbeat's dipping and the residents want to take report and the nurses are running around. And I have to grab people and be like, no, now, in the OR. So it can take, there's actually a standard of care from the American College of OBGYN, that's a 30-minute rule. You got to get in the OR within 30 minutes. Based on Cara's timing of 5 to 15 minutes to the hospital, she can be calling ahead, getting the team ready, and they're actually probably going to be even more ready than, she's just in this room and hours across the hall. So when it does come to these emergencies, having them in an urban environment such as New York, it's not like you're driving down the mountain 45 minutes. You know, it's very different. So in terms of getting to safety quickly, it's very reasonable to do that in New York. And there's a lot of iatrogenic complications, meaning complications that are caused by all of the interventions that are perpetuated in hospital births, many for purposes of avoiding institutional liability, and I would say you can't sue your home. So all that falls aside. An example I often give is you're in the hospital, 5 centimeters dilated, your water's broken, you're not contracting so much. Maybe it would be reasonable to take a nap, everyone's tired, rest a while. When you get up rejuvenated, maybe your contractions will kick in, or maybe you can walk around there, nipple stimulation. There's so many things that you can do, but in a hospital environment, I really don't have a choice. I have to say, oh, we have to give you Pitocin because the hospital is telling me to do that. And then the Pitocin creates an artificial labor, and that creates pain, creates a desire for an epidural, creates fetal distress, and there you are in the OR doing a cesarean, as one example. So I could go on quite a long time about this topic, but you know, I basically contrast both environments, and we just think about it logically. Okay, all these interventions being done in the hospital cause a lot of the complications that make birth seem so dangerous to the public, when actually a healthy woman at home with a midwife such as Cara, who's so knowledgeable and so conscious of safety, they're likely going to have a very good outcome, and that outcome will be without all of the unnecessary interventions and interference with attachment issues, mother baby bonding, and a woman's own empowerment in her body and her birth.
Jessica, do you remember that first conversation you had with Cara, and what were you thinking about?
I pretty much asked the question that Cara said people traditionally ask. I was predisposed to home birth, for sure, just from personality and worldview, and I've been exposed to it. Several people that I know had really great home births. So I mostly just wanted to know what her cesarean rate was, which is, you know, I can't remember, it's like extremely low. We had 4.
It's 30% in the US.
And
overall.
Yeah, and I needed to hear this information that Cara says that she gives about being near a hospital and about how a lot of the complications that happen in birth. We get a lot of our information from television, and on television and in movies it's always an emergency that no one knew about, and then all of a sudden it's happening. But that's my son. But she reassured me that her clinical experience and her focus during the birth is to make sure that any emergent problems are being picked up and are being dealt with, and I've just gained a lot of confidence in her and just in the idea of being at home through what she said about how easy it is to get to the hospital. And I was also familiar with a lot of these iatrogenic interferences. I had done quite a bit of research, and I just believed that I wasn't sick and I didn't need to be in the hospital, and that I would actually be at greater risk for intervention and a bad outcome if I was in the hospital. And in the end, in my case, that turned out actually to be true. I mean, I couldn't have predicted that. So those were the concerns that I was bringing with me to that meeting, and Cara was very thorough and anecdotal and all very comforting. So.
Thank you. This brings me to my next question for Aleida. I'd like to start.
Can I just
yes,
add
of course.
something
Yeah.
I want to add to that? And I think what it's important for individuals and families that are considering home birth is to take it into perspective. Just yesterday, the final birth data for the United States was published in 2006. And in this country, 0.5% of women birth their babies at home. Yet we are 27th in the developed countries in infant mortality. We also, New York State has the highest maternal mortality rate in the country, and the number one cause is postpartum hemorrhage. So if 0.5% of mothers are birthing at home, what's causing the statistics? It's not that 0.5%, you know,